The foster care program in Arkansas is already overwhelmed. Now there's going to be more babies. What happens next?
Concerned with Kavanaugh's temperament at all? I know some Democrats have expressed concern with Kavanaugh's temperament and drinking habits.
They have just called the race. Sarah Huckabee Sanders will be the next governor for Arkansas. This breaks a lot of records tonight. She will be the first woman to lead the state. She will also be the first mother to lead the state. I know that was an important factor for voters.
Her love for this country, that touches me.
We have to change the way that we look at education.
A couple hundred people are here at the Capitol right now. Some of them have been here since this morning. There's speakers right now. There's voter registration. People wanting to make their voice heard after Roe v. Wade was overturned this morning. But here's what it means for Arkansas is this afternoon, Attorney General Leslie Rutledge certified a trigger law.
The last thing that you want to have to do is pick up a phone and call a hospital lawyer to ask him legally, what can I do to take care of this patient right now?
A lot of the debate over the last few months has been about where books can go in the library and who can access them. Talking about teen books possibly being moved over to the adult section. The library says 3 books were formally challenged and 2 will be moved, but at the end of the day, anyone can check out any book. After some close calls at airports on the ground across the country, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg visits Little Rock's airport to check in on the plans here to improve our runways.
The same way that we would respond to a collision or a crash, we're going to make sure we respond to these close calls so that none of them turn into a collision or a crash.
In just a few weeks, the new regulations from the ATF could change how a gun like this is viewed, whether this stabilizer here changes it from being a handgun to a short-barreled rifle. What's next for Arkansas? I know you're just kind of continuing the job here as an incumbent, but what's the campaign going forward?
Well, we've got some big problems that we're dealing with.
Many Democrats and Republicans were frustrated with the original bill's restrictions on government transparency, including things like who joins the governor on taxpayer-funded trips. We wanted to show you the news, how millions of others are viewing it in TikTok form, the format that experts say could impact a generation on everything from mental health to national security. Under the new law, public employers like a city will have to cover mental health counseling for first responders if they go through a traumatic event on duty. Just this week, a firefighter told me the law could save lives, but some paramedics had a different reaction, finding out they weren't included. Scott Gann has spent nearly 30 years working as a first responder, as a firefighter, in law enforcement, and most recently, a paramedic.
I actually retired out of EMS because of my mental health. There's a reason that we have such a shortage on people, services, and resources.
So when a new law passed expanding mental health resources for public safety employees, he was excited until he read the fine print that it didn't include paramedics.
If you're forgotten about, how are we ever going to be taken care of? Except I don't know anyone who's ever said if they called 911, they wouldn't expect an ambulance to come.
Act 537 goes into effect next week, helping thousands. The law requires public employers to cover mental health counseling for first responders after a traumatic event on duty. Representative Carlton Wing sponsored the bipartisan bill.
Paramedics, most of them by far work for private industry, whereas our police and fire work for the government. So what we can do within government is be able to help take care of these first responders in that way.
In Arkansas, over 60% of EMS services are privately owned. However, Wing hopes this bill can help set a framework for the remaining public medical responders down the line.
This is not just the right thing to do emotionally. This is the right thing to do financially. When we lose one of them prematurely, either by leaving the field or otherwise, it's a loss for the entire community.
And John Wilkerson with the Arkansas Municipal League has been working with lawmakers and cities to make sure mental health resources stick around beyond the initial one-year trial.
The bill itself for the next year will work with it, and then in 25 we'll have something even better, and in 26 and 27 we'll have something long-lasting for the mental health of our first responders.
As some paramedics hope for further advocacy for their own health care.
I'm not taking anything away from firefighters. I'm not taking anything away from law enforcement officers or correctional officers, any of them. We all need it. All I'm asking for is to be included as well.
The Arkansas Ambulance Association verified they coordinate mental health options for member EMS systems, but Gann says additional resources like the ones Act 537 create are still needed in the medical field. After 8 years as the governor of Arkansas and recently ending a near year-long campaign to be the nation's next president, Asa Hutchinson is back home.
There's no other race like that. not governor, not senator. You're running for president of the United States.
But he's not staying far from the campaign trail. Just days after dropping out, he's now endorsing his former competitor, Nikki Haley.
She outpolled me, she outperformed, and so obviously she's got a lot of support out there. And so I shift directions and say, she's the best option that we have for our country right now.
Hutchinson has been a vocal critic of former President Donald Trump, but beyond that, he doesn't want to see a rematch of 2020.
It speaks poorly of the two major political parties that we're giving America what they don't want. And we'll see if that changes, but that's the risk to the political parties and to our political system. People are going to be frustrated. They'll stay home with that kind of a rematch.
And he's not alone. According to a December poll, most U.S. adults overall would be dissatisfied with Biden as the Democratic presidential nominee, and a similar majority would be dissatisfied with Trump getting chosen for the GOP. Do you think there needs to be a change to the political system?
The two-party system is ingrained into America, but there can be a lot of lessons learned. And the young people came up to me and they said, what hope do we have when this is what we see? Where's our voice? And so we need to give them better opportunities and choices.
And while he's no longer campaigning to be the commander-in-chief, Hutchinson is reflecting on the lessons learned this past year.
Obviously, the tough message I had didn't resonate in Iowa, but probably my primary thought is, one, what an incredible experience I've had. And I think it was good for America. It was certainly good for me. And then secondly, the regret would be that I'm not in that battle later on.
Overall, Hutchinson hopes whoever makes it on the final ballot pushes for more respect in politics and for one another.
We've had times of division, the Civil Rights era and the Vietnam War, but we've had leaders that tried to bridge the gap and bring people together. And regretfully today, we have leaders that capitalize on division, that they divide further rather than trying to bring people together.
Reporting in Little Rock, Sarah Horbacewicz, THV 11 News.
I should feel protected by the government. I shouldn't feel like I have to fight them or explain to them why I get to exist.
16-year-old Kamo Maynard O'Connell identifies as transgender. They and their mom are struggling to understand why this law and bills like it are coming from the Capitol.
To think that people who literally don't understand our story and don't know what their medical history is like, to say this is how you need to treat your medical decisions, it's very discouraging.
The law doesn't ban transgender care outright, but allows patients under 18 or their caregivers to sue their doctors for medical malpractice up to 15 years after they become an adult. This creates difficulties with malpractice insurance, putting some medical providers, like sex therapist Courtney Fearson, at high risk for a lawsuit in a confidential field.
Am I to choose lawfully abiding by this legislation, or am I to choose ethically abiding by my practice as a social worker?
But supporters of the law, like Senator Bart Hester, say rather than limiting care, it only protects children further.
I think it's really important ultimately to protect our children, especially ones that are struggling with gender identity right now. When kids are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, they just don't have the ability to make basic life choices, certainly that affect them for the very rest of their life.
Governor Sanders' team sharing with us in a statement, in part, that the governor, quote, supports bills that protect our kids and will support legislation that does just that. Still, transgender advocacy group Intransitive believes the law hurts those supporters say it's intended to protect.
A lot of youth won't make it to 18. And that's the piece that we've been arguing, and the suicide rates for the trans community in general and for trans youth are higher than cisgender people.
In search of understanding, Kamo and their mom continue working towards transgender advocacy.
There's so much work that needs to be done, and we're stuck, asking questions about people's genitalia and bathrooms. And it just feels like we are not paying remotely the right attention.
What's important to remember is that we're people too. We have stories. I think that things can get better. If we work at it, I do think that there is hope.
Reporting in Little Rock, Sarah Horbacewicz, THV 11 News.